As a customer, am I just receiving like a tube of different genes, or does that get like injected? I'm trying to picture.
We're like a big Lego store. You could think of us as having all these different little gene blocks and different types of genetic elements that we could end up pasting them together. And if we have to cut out pieces and then, push them together and introduce a mutation, that's kind of what we're doing in a nutshell.
Let's get started. So, Kristofer, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to have you here. And before we dive into learning more about vector builders, I want to take a step back and learn a little bit more about gene delivery. Okay, because on your social media platforms, you describe vector build as a one-stop solution to all your vector design, custom cloning, and virus packaging needs. And I'm just thinking for like all us commoners out here, like, what does that even mean?
It's a great question because, obviously working in the field of molecular biology or genetics, it is quite a specialized subset of science. And even within our field, we have many departments and many disciplines who don't know even what we do or how to do it. So, you could imagine the level and background of even our client base and people who use us varies tremendously. This is why we kind of actually coined this new term, gene delivery. It's not a commonly used term, but when we were kind of working through our brand and our company and who we are, we realized that to break it down for layman's people, we deliver genes. So how you could think it is, we're called VectorBuilder and we construct custom vectors for researchers in over 90 countries throughout the world. But what it is just a circle of DNA that contains your gene of interest or a tag or knocking in a mutation, whatever application you want to pursue. But at the end of the day, it's using these different vectors, which we could call different backbones. But each of these backbones are just delivery systems. One thing, like you mentioned, is virus packaging, and that's actually something that we are probably the best at in the world. And viruses, everyone thinks viruses, they think of COVID, they think of, all these bad things. When we talk about viruses, we're just talking about, you could think about it like a car or a van or a truck. And it's just a vehicle to end up shuttling any kind of gene of interest or genetic element into the cells, either specifically, you could have it ubiquitously or throughout all your cell types, through specific types of cells. You could have it deliver it, basically either spatial or temporal. So if you want to have it delivered at certain time points, if you want to actually deliver your genes and have to add an additional stimulus to activate kind of the final delivery step, you could think of, you'd have inducible expression. So you kind of have this vehicle that doesn't actually turn on and deliver its cargo or its gene until you add a certain chemical to elicit that delivery. So kind of similar to if Amazon's coming and you give it access to drop off the package. So you have to give this additional stimuli so that it leaves the package instead of taking it back and trying again another day. But that's really what vectors do. Vectors deliver genetic information, into your cells, however which way. And in the last 20, 30 years, we've learned a myriad of different new ways and new vehicles on how to deliver this information. It's not the same it was even when I was in grad school where, okay, this is the way we deliver it. Now there's countless different types of these delivery vehicles or vectors that allow you to optimize the actual delivery of the genetic material. Just to go back to keep it kind of simple, gene delivery is, you could think of the vectors as vehicles. Say if you want fast delivery, it's like a sports car. If you want to, say there's certain genes that are very large. So you could say these are like a big cargo van or a semi truck that hold the big ones, but they're a little bulky and slow and they can deliver it. But really at the end of the day, the vectors are just delivering the genetic information in a very specific way.
So what does that look like? Because you said there's different ways to deliver it. As a customer, am I just receiving like a tube of different genes, or does that get injected? I'm trying to picture, you're giving us the car analogy, but I'm like, I don't know.
You're exactly right. Essentially, we will go through and, genetically modify or custom create, synthesize, put them together. So the best way I kind of tell an analogy of us is we're like a big Lego store. You could think of us as having all these different little gene blocks and different types of genetic elements that we could end up, kind of what's called ligase, kind of like pasting them together. And if
Mm,
we have to cut out pieces and then, push them together and introduce a mutation, that's kind of what we're doing in a nutshell. But, in terms of what you actually receive, it is just a tube with a very, very small amount of liquid that is clear. Like, you don't know what it is, but there's your DNA in there and it is all ready to go. So
yeah.
another thing that we do, and again, this is thinking like a researcher and what do I want if I'm running a lab to be shipped to me by, if I'm outsourcing like any type of work. And unlike other companies, what we ship in this vial that's just a little bit of liquid is ready to go vector. So
Mm,
this is exactly designed to your specifications so
mm,
that you could take this, drop a liquid straight out of the vial you get and go straight into your experiments. Most other companies are going to send you a vial just like us, but you're going to have to then go do some modifications and move it into the shuttle or the delivery vehicle that you want to use because they only put it into like a standard backbone. And that's where you really sets us apart is we actually allow you to have whatever backbone you want. You can even send us your backbones and we'll work with them. So it's really fully customizable.
mm.
And what you get as a deliverable is a final product ready to go into your experiments immediately.
Gotcha. So how many like companies are there that actually do this like gene delivery?
There's quite a few. It's not a huge market, but I would say that most of our competitors and most of the people in the market are synthesizing. So
Mm,
what they're doing is just building, like they're just making it synthetically from scratch. You tell them, I want this string of A's, G's, and C's. They go to their machine and they synthetically print it. You could think of them like the synthetic diamond. They're just as good,
yeah.
but they are synthetically made. And then you look at us, we kind of are like the real diamond still. We will synthesize if we have to, because sometimes you have to. But ideally, we try to minimize synthesis because it costs money and it costs time. And we'd like to take all of our little Lego blocks or genetic elements
Mm,
and try to piece them together, thereby kind of avoiding the need to synthesize something new. And what this does is it allows us to complete some of the hardest, most complex projects in the world. Because you could imagine like synthesizing, it's great for some regions, but if you have a highly repetitive sequence of DNA, so you have lots of A's or lots of T's, G's, or C's in a row, it's very hard to synthesize that artificially. If you are trying to synthesize, and this is something I did in grad school, like a giant inverted stem loop, whereas you're going to synthesize this kind of inverted repeat that when it's linearized, it's going to fold on itself. There's different structures, what we call secondary structures in the DNA that could inhibit the ability to synthesize it. We actually, surprisingly, even have some of our biggest competitors in our field end up taking on projects, failing, and then referring them to us because they know
interesting.
we can get it done. So
Yeah.
we are very, very, quickly building the reputation as the company to go to for any complex requests. And I'm okay with that. We might not be the biggest in the market, but we're known as like the true scientists. And to me, that's what I hang my hat
I love hearing that you have competitors that are sending you projects that they're not able to do themselves. We kind of have the similar thing in software design, software development as well. And we call them rescue projects because the clients went through one agency, they couldn't get it done. So now we're coming in to like fix their problems. And I'm curious, like, how have you been able to build vector builders to get to that level of intricacy where you are able to take on projects that your competitors are not able to fulfill? Like, what is it about your team and how you guys are working that's allowing you to get to that level of complexity?
realistically, it's pretty simple. We haven't sold out. We haven't gone for profits. By doing so, we're actually making profits by doing it the right way. We're very much contrarians here at Vector Builder, with the biggest one probably being myself. When people are going to zig, I'm going to zag. And it's just
Mm,
something I've been doing my entire life. How we like get over that hurdle is by truly caring about each of the
mm,
projects we take on and treating you could call them clients or customers, like collaborators. How I got the company off the ground, I was actually like dialing into lab meetings at the Hanover Medical School, somewhere, at UCL in London, at UCSD. I was calling in every other week to like join their lab meeting and troubleshoot with them and offer my advice in my experience. Because being at the bench for as long as I was, I actually became quite a good cloner. One of these very exact but not exact sciences where you could follow all the protocols, but it still doesn't work. So it's about thinking outside the box and thinking about, because at the end of the day, we're just throwing a bunch of liquids in a tube, like a
Yeah.
couple drops here, a couple drops here, and then we're hoping that the reaction takes place. Theoretically,
Yeah.
we could do everything right, but sometimes there's things you have to think abstractly and really go against the curve and try things that the protocol doesn't say you should do. And that's how you truly learn. And to me, that's what research is. Oh, this lab here did this 10 years ago, so let's try to repeat it and then do this. That's not research. Is saying, oh, they have some data showing this. But what about if we addressed it from this, or from this point of view? Realistically, I hire PhDs from all different types of disciplines, whether it be neuroscientists, oncology, cardiology, nephrologists, just all over, to get immunologists, bioinformaticians, to get different views of opinions. The fact that we have upwards of 45, 50 PhDs in the company now, we get to be able to like have 40 or 50 of me being able to help clients all over the world. So again, like looking at it and, taking what they learned in their PhD and the questions they asked, and then saying, oh, I actually encountered something similar, a few years ago, and how I got over that hurdle is I did this. And the beauty is because we build like hundreds of thousands of vectors, we're constantly learning from our mistakes. When we have a difficulty with a project, we don't just keep plugging away until it works. We do, but we're always taking notes and keeping records of that, so we can learn from that when we encounter it again. When you do thousands and thousands of projects a month and they're extremely highly like complex, you eventually build like kind of a holy grail or a cheat sheet on how to build these vectors and the real hard ones. When you learn from your mistakes and you learn from your previous experiences, you really evolve into something that's next to none in our field. And I think that's how we got to be able to kind of jump over some of our competitors and build this reputation as the company that really excels when complexity is involved.
Yeah, it sounds like there's like a lot of different experimenting and research and learning from past projects and data. I love that. And I'm curious, like, are there any dangers with all that experimenting? Is there anything that can be dangerous on like how genes are put together? I don't know if that's like a dumb question or not, but
Yeah, no, it's not a dumb question. The regulatory authorities are constantly asking similar types of questions who are not in the know. I want to start by saying everything that we produce and generate is non-pathogenic. It's not toxic. It's extremely safe to humans in every way. I've even offered to drink our viruses in front of
what?
because we genetically engineer them and strip away all of the factors that make it harmful to humans and make it very, very safe to work with. So even if it touches your skin or you ingest it or anything, it is just as the nutrition facts is essentially like salty water.
Okay.
So there really is no harm in what we do. Now, what information you could get from building these vectors? Yes, of course. Like this is the power of genetics, right? This is the power of new age that we're encroaching into. It can be scary. It can be scary because as we learn more, we're going to open ourselves up to another, wave of people who could somehow maybe take this information and use it to harm. But it's the same with everything, right? It's the same when fission,
Yeah.
nuclear power came into this. So we're always going to have bad people. But in terms of the science in general, at least the saving grace in that aspect is this stuff is really complex. So not many people are going to be able to figure this out very easily. It's not like you could say, okay, this gene encodes this really, really bad disease. So if I put it into here, it's going to infect everyone. It's a lot harder than that. There's a lot of variables to come in to make it harmful. It's a powerful science and it's a new science. People forget that, genetics has just been around for 100 years now. Since I think it was the early 1900s when we identified a nucleus in a cell. And it wasn't until the 50s where we learned the structure of the DNA double helix. We didn't sequence the human genome until the 90s with Craig Venter, Bill Clinton, the Human Genome Project. And, so that's only been around for 30 years, not even 30 years of a full human genome. The science is very young. To worry about some of the dangers that we could encounter down the line. But just, like with any new science, you're going to have these kind of worries. But I don't like the amount of good that could come of harnessing the understanding of genetics by far outweighs the bad. Like it's the same thing with nuclear power, right? Energy and power you could harness from it is very, very useful to clean energy. Now, most of the world, with the exception of France, doesn't seem to really agree with that. But the power of genetics to cure diseases and make life better for not only humans but all organisms has always fascinated me. I guess like that end goal is becoming more and more reachable year after year. But again, being a young science, we're so far away from
Yeah.
really understanding. And it seems like the more we kind of chip away on a mechanism or understand a disease, the more complex we truly see it is.
I have some questions that coming out of that too, because I'm thinking as there's more research and more development in this field, I'm wondering, one, who's buying these genes, right? Like, are they utilizing it to cure diseases? Or does the technology or does the science get to a point where the clients are using this to create like designer babies too?
That is the designer baby thing is a hot topic when talking about CRISPR or kind of genome editing or anything like this. And again, much more difficult than it seems when we're talking about harnessing the power of a genome editing enzyme like CRISPR or zinc fingers or talons. We know how to modify a single gene. You constantly have 35,000, if not probably more, 60, 70,000 genes that are going in different levels in all of your different cells right now. And we know how to modify a few at a time. So to make that jump to designer babies, we're nowhere near people worrying about that yet. Again, like eventually can these things happen? Who knows? Something that only time will tell. I know other scientists who, if you challenge them, and especially in the nanotechnology field, they'll claim that all of us who are maybe under 50 are never going to die. Because in the next 20 years, there's going to be the singularity and we're going to merge with machines and then they're going to be fixing all of our cancer cells, right? So but that hasn't progressed like it has when it came out 20 years ago. There's been very little progression. So genetics and gene therapy is showing more promise to actually helping and curing diseases, but time will tell. But for us, we only ship to academic universities or institutes or established biotech companies, pharma companies. We do a rigorous background check before delivering anything. Anything that is ordered is run through an algorithm to make sure there's no harmful possibilities. For example, like we'll basically what's called blast, and you kind of against any new sequence that somebody wants us to kind of put into a vector or create, just to make sure it doesn't share similarities with other known pathogens or something that they could be up to something that maybe they shouldn't be. Or for example, 10, 15 years ago, we would flag people trying to clone the cannabis gene. Now,
Oh,
most
yeah.
states in the U.S. now, we have to let that go, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
perfectly legal. So, but, these are the kind of things that we always want to make sure to do our due diligence so that we could prevent anything falling into the wrong hands. Because all it takes is one bad egg to really set the whole field of genetics back decades. And that's probably one of the, along with politics, is probably some of my biggest concerns of the field as we continue to learn more and data is shared and information is shared more with all the different social networking platforms.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lot of work on the due diligence part. And I'm sure, that's one layer. It's how you guys are ethically carrying yourselves. But I assume there's also another layer with government regulations as well that you guys have to go through.
Yeah. So, one of like our biggest claim to fame was in 2020 during the pandemic. We worked really hard to what's called pseudotype the S protein, the spike protein for COVID. And this is like the main infective protein. It was, they found out this was causing a lot of the virulence. And we ended up basically stripping out all of the DNA that would allow it to infect humans and making it completely safe for anybody to study. And by doing this, we then allowed university labs and even biotech labs who are BSL2 at a lower level. They don't have all the hazmat suits and everything on. So it could basically go into UC Riverside and be studied by the Department of Genetics or Department of Molecular Biology. And this was a huge thing for us because it really spoke to our mission statement of trying to improve science worldwide and have this, no matter who you are and what country you're from or where you're working, you should really have access to the most cutting edge technologies so that you could push research to where
Yeah.
it needs to be. We don't know if it's a grad student in, Jordan or somebody at Oxford. Like, who's going to make that next big breakthrough? And
Yeah.
it's wrong of us to say just because they have a more prestigious institution, it's going to be them. So,
Talk about like right place, right time in terms of like just being able to have that ready during the pandemic.
well, wasn't ready. I mean, we just worked really hard
Yeah.
because it was those first couple of months when we didn't know what was going to happen.
Hmm.
It was like in March and April and even into May. And we were, we found out they sequenced the S protein, they found it, and we were like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we really worked very hard. We did do our due diligence as well by really taking the virus seriously. And we ended up like quarantining and closing up our manufacturing early so that this allowed us to actually reopen earlier than everybody else. So then when we came back, we were actually like first to the game to start manufacturing again.
Yeah.
And you could imagine for like being a company that pharma and research institutes outsourced to during the pandemic, like they couldn't go into the labs. So like the
Yeah.
research hit a standstill,
Wow.
like unless you were able to outsource it to companies like us.
Yeah.
So not only did we felt like we had, it was our due diligence to keep even all the grad students, right? Grad students want to graduate. They can't just graduate unless their research progresses, but they're
Yeah.
not being allowed into the labs because depending on what state they are, they might be locked down and not allowing people in. So we allowed people to, kind of in silico continue their research moving while we're actually performing a lot of the experiments for them and building so that when they're able to come back to the lab, everything they need is there and they could run the experiment themselves and then publish the data.
That's a lot of pressure just to get that right. What was going through, yeah, like I'm curious, like what was going through your mind or like where you were at that point of time.
Well, at that time, like so it actually is like an interesting story because that was when we kind of like we separated from our parent company the year before. And at that time, being the person who kind of leads a lot of the commercial aspects, which we could save that for another podcast. I was almost forced into over the years because of my background, even though I wanted to be more at the science side. Commercially, it was very tough because we were a growing company and we didn't know how we were going to grow through that. So like unlike other companies who were, oh, we have to like downsize, we have to make layoffs, we have, to do this. We were at the stage where we needed more people. We needed to expand our team. But how do you do that when you're a quirky, unique company like we are at VectorBuilder?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I really pride myself on the culture, that the organizational culture that we built over the last 10 years and having this kind of ragtag of really, really brilliant people who are able to like be themselves, not have to play the corporate politics and climb the ladder. And it's more like the kind of the better you are as a person and the more you help the company, the
Mm.
more you rise. And that's how it should be. Not because so and so, because you've been here longer. And we really do take a different approach to how we built that culture. But so I have this kind of pickiness of picking very unique people. And I even had at this time when we were still small and just still in startup phase, I preferred to kind of interview everyone myself even and, fly them in or I'd fly to them. And
Mm.
obviously that was difficult. So trying to expand a team when borders are closed
Yeah.
and you can't even travel. And then when do you set a start date? How do you train them? How do there's just so many things we had to adapt to during the pandemic. And then to top it off, we pseudotyped the spike protein and business took off. So we were
Wow.
extremely busy, but it was very tough because I had a lot of friends in the service industry who were having very difficult times. I mean, people had difficult times all over the world. And in our field, I mean, I guess you could say we're having our difficult times now, as I'm sure you know that the sector has cut its funding, especially from VC investment over the past 18 months drastically because of what increased during 2020, 2021, and
Hmm.
2022. So it was very difficult to kind of keep up with the expectations, right?
Yeah.
And then having to explain to everybody about the vaccine and having the naysayers and having to be in those conversations, and then even running a company, right? And hoping that everybody in your organization is going to get vaccinated and keep the spread of the virus down. But I think the whole pandemic situation, there's a lot that we could learn from it. It was a terrible time globally for everyone who suffered, but I don't think we should let those people, suffer in vain. And we should learn from our mistakes. It's kind of the theme of what I've been telling you
Hmm.
is we all make mistakes. I mean, I made I think a few yesterday, and I know I made a
Yeah.
couple last week.
Yeah.
And I think if we could all just admit that we make mistakes and learn from them and become better people from them, that's going to make the whole world, not
Yeah.
only my field or the company, it's just going to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that's truly what I want to see out of everyone in my organization and just in my daily friend circle, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's the best way to learn. And, just going slightly off topic too, like when there was like, I heard like there was I think it was a nurse that was doing like research on her patients or folks that were on their last like deathbed. And when asked like, what's your like biggest regret in life? And the majority answered like not making enough mistakes or not having enough things that they regret about. Like not taking the chances, basically, living life too
Oh, see, I
safely.
take lots of chances. I regret many things. I am
Yeah.
not in that boat whatsoever. I mean, I guess starting a global organization without much guidance or experience in it, you definitely learn. You learn a lot, and I think I'm still learning every day with my team, and I make it very clear to them that nobody's perfect, but I think it's just a different thing. Yeah, for somebody who says they haven't made enough mistakes in life, I don't know. They're either probably lying or they
Yeah.
can't.
Or they're just living
I
too
just
safe. Like they're just coasting by. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. I guess if you did that, but like to me, that is the biggest mistake then.
Exactly, exactly. And like it's like with research and with building a company and just with life, the biggest breakthroughs are going to come from making mistakes and just trying new things and experimenting as much as possible and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, and I mean, and we love that for multiple reasons for our company. Obviously, like we built this based on pushing the limits and pushing the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Innovation, innovation, innovation.
Yeah.
If you're not innovating, then I don't know who you are in our field.
Yeah. And I want to go back to that too, because we kind of digressed a little bit on the whole gene delivery. And I actually wanted to ask you one of the first questions I wanted to ask you when we ended up having this whole conversation is how everything even got started. You guys have emerged as a game changer in this industry. So where did it all begin for you?
That's actually a really funny story. I'll try to recount it because I've told it a few times now. So it all started in Hyde Park in the University of Chicago, I would say. So, I studied a field called epigenetics in my PhD, and the founder of our organization, Dr. Bruce Long, was a full-time tenured professor at University of Chicago with a field track in epigenetics. So I was reading his papers, citing them in my research. I think, wrote him a few emails throughout writing my dissertation. And so he was a name in my mind. And then when I saw that he was running an organization and it was in Chicago, and at this time I wasn't living in Chicago, but I had family living there, I, really didn't have so much desire to work for the company he was running at that time. This isn't VectorBuilder, but I saw it as kind of like, okay, well, I'll go see my family. They're going to fly me out. I'll go back home to Chicago for a little bit. I'll get a pizza, I'll get and that's kind of what it was. I had my sister pick me up from the airport. I even called in a pizza order because in Chicago sometimes they take about an hour to cook. I called Bruce and told him to put in a pizza order because I didn't think the meeting was going to be very long. He was going to read through me. And then I showed up to this, small pizza place on the University of Chicago campus, met him. It was, we just sitting in a booth. And he kind of said, before we get started, because he was interviewing me for a role and to kind of, take over a huge chunk of his business. And he said, before we get started on that, I have this idea I'm working on. It's this website, this platform to build vectors and make it so that everyone could kind of do the design. And then you add it to your cart, kind of like checking out like Amazon. And he shows me this is 10 years ago now, like kind of what the bare bones of what VectorBuilder is now today. And we just immediately start nerding out. Like it wasn't an interview anymore. It was two huge nerds sitting there. I end up like moving to his side of the booth, and then we're sitting there behind his computer, like just like playing with things. And I was like, oh, and so because I had a master's in bioinformatics coming there, so I'm not the greatest coder, but I could code. So I was like going into the code. I was like, oh, what if we did this? What if we moved this here? And then we had this option here so that they could check out this way. And then they, and adding new features and just seeing what this could be. And 1 hour goes by, and then he actually had a class to teach. He looks at his watch. He missed the first like 30 minutes. And he's like, I'm not okay, we go back to it. We go back to the thing. We're pointing at the computer. We keep going. Another hour goes by. And then another hour. And we're there for 3 hours. And he's like, all right, I have a lab coming up in 30 minutes. He's like, I have to go to the lab because they're hard to make up.
Yeah.
So we end up, then we sit and look at each other after just, staring at his screen and what was, what became VectorBuilder for 3 hours. And then we said, wait, wasn't this supposed to be an interview? So we didn't talk about the job at all.
Yeah.
So he's like, oh, can we meet for lunch tomorrow and we could actually do what we meant to do today?
Yeah.
And at that point, it was over, right? There was no need for an interview. It was just more. He won me over. I guess I won him over as well. And we complement each other very well. And we just instantly clicked. And then we were developing VectorBuilder as kind of our side project for the parent company. The parent company was making custom animal models. To make a custom animal model, you need a custom vector. So like this was the company making the vectors to make the animal models. But little did we know that making the custom vectors was going to be the way bigger company in the end. So I end up, even on the first day, I mean, there was just a trust between us that I really can't even explain. Because even like before my official first day, I, voiced to him, because I was into international business and I thought I spoke German better than I apparently don't. I told him I wanted to move to Europe and open up a European office for us, because a lot of American companies struggle with making that transition over to Europe. And he was, before I even started, he's like, well, you want to go now? And I was like, whoa, let me see if I like this working with you, uproot my life. But yeah, then we kind of, I start traveling the world and building, the parent company. But everywhere I went, I kind of was mentioning our little side project in our website VectorBuilder. And then after a few years, it was very, very, very clear that this was the company to back. And we spun off in 2018 towards the end of the year. We're standalone in 2019. And last year we became a unicorn company. So, I mean, really just, you can't really ask for it to be much better than how things have progressed. And we're not stopping anytime soon. So we got our Series C funding and have just continued to push and continue to grow and continue to build on that reputation while not compromising on quality.
Well, congratulations on being a unicorn company and the last raise. I mean, can't imagine how difficult it's been to get there.
Yeah. What I think I learned was that nobody knows what that means.
Yeah.
Unless you're like really kind of in the VC field. I remember continuing bringing it up. And everyone's like, they're like, oh, that's great.
No. Oh, it's a cool term, unicorn. Yeah. Okay.
It is a cool term. We had fun with the marketing, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. So you had, okay. So from starting out at that pizza shop, sitting in that booth, at what point were you guys like, okay, we need to spin this off and separate it from the parent company, and this is it? Like, was there a moment where it just clicked in you that you're like, I need to go all in with this?
It took me a couple years because, again, I mean, I actually came from our largest competitor. So they actually got me and poached me like right when I came out of school, and I worked for them for a year. And I said, I could do this better. I could do this better, maybe not from a business perspective, but from a scientific perspective and from treating the clients. So I said, I am going to, I was very determined to take all of the cloning abilities I met and kind of build a company like that. And I think when I met with him and I saw an opportunity to do that with Bruce and VectorBuilder, it kind of clicked with me almost instantly. But this is where I learned that you have to play the game, right? You can't just, okay, we got a great idea, let's go. So we already had funding, we already had established client base. So the good thing is they kind of like blended into each other. But I think then there's like a technology called CAR T and gene therapy and viruses being used, like lentivirus or adeno-associated virus, kind of becoming more and more popular to use as these gene delivery vehicles, like we talked about earlier. And then we began to become like the best at packaging those particles. And that's kind of when we realized this is the future, because you could sell a custom set of animal models. It'll take you about 10 to 16 months to make these models because you have to breed the animals, etc. And then after you build the model, the researcher is going to need probably 1, 2, 3 years to study it. So the repeat ordering in that business model is pretty horrendous.
Yeah. Wow.
If,
Three
if a
years.
client buys from you,
Yeah.
then like it takes us a year to make it. It takes
Yeah.
them 2 years to study it, and then they're ready to buy again. Whereas, with viruses and vectors, they take days or weeks to make, and then to test them also takes days or weeks to test. So instead of having years, now we're down to weeks. So then we just saw, and then one order of packaged virus cost the same as one of these custom animal projects.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was kind of a no-brainer that
Yeah.
like this is the future. And it's good to see that although like, animal testing is still a tried and true for our clinical trials, the FDA and EMA and other authorities are trying to, lean away from the animal testing and animal modeling into some other ways to basically assess drugs before they enter clinical trials.
Yeah.
So, it's about noticing and following the trends.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I'm very happy that we were able to kind of pivot at the right time to follow this trend and then now take it to where it needs to be. And the beauty about VectorBuilder is, and the field is, we're just getting started, because our biggest competitor is the researcher. It's our customers
Oh,
doing it
wow.
themselves in the lab. That's still our biggest competitor. Is when you talk to people, they're like, "Oh, I could do it. Oh, I could do it," and they can. A lot of them can,
Yeah.
if it's not too complex, and they could do it faster because they don't have to ship anything. They don't have to wait for customs and this and that. However, that's if everything works perfectly. And if you work in a lab, you'll know that that doesn't happen. It
Yeah.
very rarely works exactly like you want it to. And times have changed. Even when I was graduating, I was actually asked to publish a paper based on the complex vector I made, but that doesn't happen anymore. That's like, these vectors are truly delivery vehicles, and you can't publish papers making them anymore. So how we've pivoted is like, these are just complex reagents, right? This is like a reagent you need to do your experiment. So let us focus on building the complex reagent while you focus on the experiments you're going to use with it. So it's just this change in the paradigm of how research is done and how companies are going to come in, just like companies came in, years ago for other utilities or other experimentation. Now, it's taking longer than I think I'd like, because there's still this sense of hazing. Anybody who starts a PhD in a life science discipline, the first thing you're going to be asked to do, if it's molecular based, is to make these vectors. So it's kind of like a rite of passage to learn how to do this. But I think over time, just like, my PI from my PhD, his dissertation was about publishing, he sequenced part of a protein. And, he got a PhD from Yale for sequencing part of a protein back in the 60s. Now you just put it, something in a Dropbox, they sequence it for you, it comes back in 12 hours. So like, obviously technology, as it continues to improve, people are going to have to pivot to new things. So how we look at the market is like, the market, while it's, somewhat finite, people are just going to be outsourcing more and more to
Mm.
companies like us. So the future is so bright as we establish our niche as, one of the major players in this field.
Yeah. And speaking of outsourcing, I read that you guys do your manufacturing of jeans in China. And I'm curious if you have any like pushbacks or hesitations from customers because of where it's coming from. And also for like any businesses that has outsourcing as part of their business, I'm curious, like, what is your advice on how to reassure your customers of the quality?
Yes. So obviously, as you can imagine, we go through cycles with this exact topic. A lot of people, there is this negative stigma of manufacturing in China, not only for our field, but for many different things, electronics, whatever it is. And this association of if it's made in China, it's cheap. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And it actually really, sometimes upsets me when people stereotype one of the largest, most populated countries in the world. And it just, to me, it comes off, it doesn't come off in the best light, because every country has poor quality in certain things, right? Every country, has the best and the worst. But yeah, there is this stigma, especially with European and American researchers, that manufacturing in China is not the best quality. But to get over that, we just ask them to try us, and basically, once they do, and they see that not only do we have the quality of anyone else, even though despite almost everyone is manufacturing in China, but so there's not many people who are manufacturing outside of China, really. But it comes down to like all the different levels. So what we have is we have the best customer service, all life science companies. So we train, I train my people that no matter what time of the day, you're going to get a response within an hour, maybe two, at very most 24 hours. No email is gone, over 24 hours without an answer. Now, you might not have an answer to your question, but you will get an answer that tells you that we have received your request and that we're working on it. And it'll be personal. It won't just be an automated thing. So this is something that was a huge pet peeve of mine when I was back in the lab outsourcing to companies, is you send them an email and you don't know where it went. Did they get it? Are they working on my request? Can someone give me an update? And then you wait day after day after day after day after day. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, they contact you and then they ask you another question. And at that point, I'm like, I'm just done. I'm done with them. So one of our biggest things is effective communication. If people need to, I have people from Melbourne, Australia to, San Diego. So almost every time zone is covered.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be like a PhD or at least a master's level person who could jump on a call, could walk you through something, could just have a quick meeting with you to kind of let you express yourself and your needs. And then, we also make our website and kind of communication portal as easy as possible to communicate via text, via attachments and kind of file sharing to really, because a lot of people, we are scientists. Some of us don't like to actually talk to people, prefer to do everything behind the computer.
Yeah.
So, basically that's another thing you learn is that some clients you never call, you never send them a video invite. They want everything to be email based. And others want you to come and have a coffee with them. And a lot of it's defined by culture and just individuals. But really just taking that utmost kind of extra care from the customer service perspective, I think ultimately will always win them over when they have people who could speak their native language and be able to, whether it be Spanish, German, French, English, I was going to say Australian, a little bit different, but yeah, Japanese. We have 2 offices, Korean, all the different languages. Like we can accommodate, however to effectively communicate, and that's very unique in any global organization. And to have somebody who actually knows the science and actually could offer it besides just somebody who's a translator really tends to win them over. And like I said, in our field, it comes down to reputation and publications. So we're quickly being cited in every major journal for the things we make. We're constantly going to conferences and seeing people present research using our materials. So the beginning was tough. It was really tough to kind of convince people that our quality was there just because we're manufacturing in a place like China. But I think then people kind of realized it. And the fact that a lot of other people obviously follow this route made it easier. But then you'll always have, cases where it comes back into play. Like there's obviously we had some other companies in our field were recently brought into the mainstream media with some of the things that the Congress is going after for them. So you really never know how politics is going to approach us. But as long as we could keep it within the scientific community, I think ultimately they know that your reputation is everything.
Yeah.
So that's what always is our saving grace. But it is difficult with some people in certain cultures who always have that stigma. But we do our best to break it down, and we'll even give products away for next to nothing to show them that we mean business.
Yeah, so just building trust. I love that. I wanted to ask you, just going back to quality and communication, besides the protocols you put in place about making sure that emails are being answered within 24/7 and having a website where people can communicate with your team, how do you, like, as a leader, how do you ensure that your team understands what good quality customer service means?
I mean, for the sales team, it's pretty easy because they've seen that leads to more sales, and then that leads to more commission for them. So it tends to be easier for the
Yeah.
sales team to see it. I think what really helps there is, like I was telling you kind of before the call, is almost everyone in our organization are scientists, and we get them very young and like fresh out of school before they're somewhat corrupted with the way business is done,
Yeah.
because like they go into a big pharma company. I don't want to
Yeah.
say any names because you're probably our clients, but I actually had a perfect story. Was my PhD, who leads our French team, joined my company at this time. I was traveling. It was very hectic. He, after working for me for about a year, he got an offer for his dream job at a pharma
Mm.
company that's right in his hometown. And he came to me and was like, I can't turn this down. This is what I've always wanted to do. This is where I went to school, was to work for this big pharma company and this. So I said, you know what? Go, you're young, go see it. I'll be waiting for you when you
Yeah.
come back. And after the first week, he told some of his colleagues, and they're still here, that he wanted to come back after a week. And he was like, oh, he's not going to take me back. This. And then 3 weeks later, he finally reached out to me and was like, can I come back?
Oh, wow.
I let him back
Yeah.
because I knew like what he was going to see from a company. And this is like for most companies, it's bureaucracy, right?
Yeah.
And that corporate game and the politics that you have to play to get anything done.
Yeah.
And again, we just avoid that. And, to get people to buy into it is, for outside of our manufacturing, 35-40% of our employees are PhD level. Another
Yeah.
35% is master's level. And then there's only a few people without a graduate level degree. Now, again, I don't want to stress degrees too much because I'm over that. And that's somewhere I learned over the last, decade. But in general, like, we're getting a lot of people coming out of graduate school who just were writing a dissertation or defending their thesis or whatever it is. So it's very easy to get them to buy into this kind of take care of your researchers.
Yeah.
Because they were just in their shoes. And it's something that I always tell, like, for example, if I have like new salespeople that are going to go visit a university, I tell them, do not wear a suit. Like, wear your nerdiest t-shirt. Just basically, like, obviously don't cover things up and be presentable.
Yeah.
But like, I want you to nerd out as much as possible, because if you're going to go talk to like a postdoc or somebody in the lab, they're not going to talk to you if they're in a suit. I know I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, when I saw those sales reps walking around, I used to go hide in the fridge in the room, or I'd like just go into the microscope room and tell
Yeah.
them I was busy. I would avoid them at all costs.
Yeah.
But if somebody came in with a Darth Maul T-shirt, I'd probably start chatting them up right away. And you can see it in our website and our marketing. Like, we're definitely out there.
Yeah.
We don't have that typical white paper. And some of my employees are always like, we need to have that stuff like every other company has. And I said, you just said exactly why we're not going to have that.
Mm.
And that's, not how we tend to do. Of course, there's industry standards and everything we're going to accommodate, but we do really, really try to, to be different. And that's what drives our innovation, right? Because innovation is halted by structure and
Yeah.
by repetitive nature and this. So I would say the hardest thing is to have the structure you need while still promoting and fostering the innovation. That's one of the hardest things to balance, because as now we're getting larger, there is amount of structure, right?
Yeah.
I can't just have people, submit their receipts in a different way.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have structure, you have to have oversight, but at the same time, once you set up too much, then people aren't thinking outside the box anymore.
Right. So yeah, like what is that balance, is like where you have the structure and yet you're still allowing for the different thinking, the collaboration, and allowing people to have different thoughts and ideas shared in the company. Where's the balance in that?
I mean, it's tough. I'm sure I'm still always trying to find it. If I knew an exact answer, I'd probably write a book, like the New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
But I think it's different from person to person too. And different people they have different brains and different ways that they approach any kind of problem. So it's about fostering their ability to try new things and know they're not going to be penalized or looked down at because they made a mistake or try to do something this way, while also having just enough structure to make sure that we're going to keep our cash flows good and everyone's going to get paid on time every single month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a balance, because you could easily go one way or another, and I think over time I've realized what we need to do to kind of keep the ability for us to continue to be innovators. So and that's what my team knows. Like, we work really hard to try to come close to making a profit, but any profits we do go straight back into the company. So, like, the better we do, the better everybody benefits in the company. It's not like only the few up top are getting the benefits. The better we do as a team, the better computers they'll get next year.
Yeah.
The better dinners I'll let them expense, Michelin stars or whatever.
Yeah.
It's using these different incentive mechanisms, and then just trying to treat everybody like equals, right? Investing in all of them. And I think that's a very tough thing by trying to grow, because I never just tried to grow this company in one country. It was never one country for me. It was always the world. And I was always just fascinated by different cultures and how, we're so similar, but people have, like, they think we're so different. But deep down, we're just all the same on this rock. So seeing that, I think that's another thing that I really try to promote is again, with bringing all these really intelligent new people who haven't worked a lot in industry in general. I'd say a lot of people, this is their first job. So it's about investing into all of them by giving them the resources they need, whether that be sending them to conferences or to workshops or to training programs, but trying to keep it equal. Because if you don't invest into all of your people equally, not only will it be difficult for you to judge their individual performance, to give them feedback or see how they could go, but it also actually hurts the company because it doesn't allow us to assess market potential as we try to break into every market across the world. So it's something I constantly, am battling with and trying to balance. But it's one of those, like, problems that there might not be an answer, but it's sure a lot of fun.
That's a very common thing I hear from people who are really successful in what they're doing, is that whatever they are doing in their lives, it's always about how do you have fun with it. It's such an amazing mentality to have, because whatever you do, it's going to be hard anyways, right? Like, get a job, that's going to be hard. Start a company, that's going to be hard. But how are you going to have fun with it?
Yeah, I think having fun, like, it's one of the questions in my interview is what gets you out of bed in the morning. And, I had to change it slightly to what motivates you, right?
Yeah.
And then I had to change it to what motivates you if money wasn't an issue. Because if you just say what motivates you, people in an interview, they always try to give you that answer that I want to hear.
Yeah.
When, it's hard for me to explain it. And for your audience listening, I'll give them, I like to, on these podcast interviews, give a piece of information that nobody else is going to have. So it's, like, unique to your show. And that's for anybody who's going to apply to VectorBuilder. Kind of a little bit of a spoiler on our hiring process. One is, anyone listening, go to our careers page. Don't go to recruiters. Don't go to Indeed. If you really want to work for a company, come to the site. Go look around. The other thing is, we'll have several rounds of interviews with my colleagues as it works up. If you get to the interview with me, just be yourself. Most of my questions are going to be very much personality based and trying to see if you fit within the culture. What's the last book you read or last movie you've seen, things like that. For the what gets you out of bed in the morning, my favorite answer was her phone. Like as her alarm clock. And I was like, okay.
The AirPod came off.
I'm pretty sure I hired her. I think she's in San Francisco.
I was not expecting that. At least she's honest.
It was just, like, to me, it was truly, it's just one of those answers that you're like, touche.
Yeah. You have to respect that. Yeah.
You just got to respect that. They say that, right?
Yeah.
It's like the same thing when you're talking to salespeople and you say what motivates you. And then they, it's like they don't want to say money. And when they don't realize that, like, if I'm hiring you for business development or sales, like, money is probably the right answer.
I hope you say money. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm hiring you, my logistics supervisor, maybe money is what motivates you. But, like, or if I'm going to hire you to be a scientist, I don't want to. But if I'm going to hire you to, like, develop my business, like, you should say that you want money. You want to grow the company. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask that question back to you, Kristofer. What motivates you to get out of bed?
Oh, well, I'll be honest. Like, it's not every day that I'm excited to get up and go to work. I'd be lying if it was every day, because I think everybody, I've been working here 10 years, and there's always going to be days, especially when you work 6 7 days a week, that you don't want to get out of bed. But I think ultimately I've sacrificed a lot to build this organization and to build what I call like the VB family. And I think what gets me out of bed is firstly to truly help accelerate research. I realized that when I was writing my dissertation, I was in the lab. I could have been a very good researcher. I could have maybe I could have pushed for the Nobel. Maybe I could have pushed for this. I could have like worked my butt off. I mean, and really tried hard and won some awards. I could have been a National Academy member. I could have played that game. But ultimately, I would just be such a small fish studying one disease, one pathway, one gene, and it wasn't enough for me. It wasn't. So I always wanted to be able to just help all different types of diseases, right? Who knows what I'm going to fall ill with when I'm older? So I like kind of hedge my bets, throw my feelers out. So what really gets me up is, and it sounds cheesy, but it's saving lives. Like if I could just develop something like the S protein that could end up helping the vaccine. We ended up helping actually make one of the vaccines in the initial proof of concept. It wasn't the most popular of the vaccines, but it served its purpose, especially for people that were homeless. So, just to be able to say that your hard work ended up saving one life or two lives, it really makes me feel better about myself. And like I was, that I achieved something. That at least if I was put on this earth to do that, then I'll feel better. And when you see your colleagues or your customers or collaborators truly making these breakthroughs, and
Mhm.
they did it with the vector you helped them build, it's just fascinating, and it just makes you feel really good at night. It's like the same thing. Like, I think I only get that feeling when I volunteer, which unfortunately is not as much as I would like to these days. But you just feel like when you touch somebody else's life and you make an impact, that to me is like a feeling like no other. And yeah, if I could do it, if I could wake up every day and help one person, that'll be a good day.
Very inspiring. Yeah. Impact driven. So looking ahead, Chris, what is the vision that you have for Vector Builders?
Oh, the vision. Well, I mean, I want us to become a household name. I want everybody to use us, not to use us as customers, but just to use us. We have so many free tools, and like our design suite is completely free to use. So I just want like kind of what we built in here at Vector Builder just to become kind of like industry standard, so that when you walk into any lab across the world, there's going to be like, vector builder IDs, or everybody's just going to have heard of the company or this. My goal, and it's actually happened in some labs, but I would like it to be universal, is when everybody's sitting for their weekly lab meeting and you're going through whoever's presenting their project, and they hit a failure or they hit a speed bump or a roadblock. I just want, when things get too tough, people to just say, go to Vector Builder, let them do it. Just go to Vector Builder. Like, we're just the default people that could do the things that you can't do. And to me, that's just like, it's just so, and that's because of our hard work and our dedication and learning from our mistakes and everything we do. But that would truly be like a success story for me. If people like we basically become synonymous with gene delivery. Anything that's related to getting genetic material into your organism or cells, you're going to come to us as the experts. And you're going to know that we don't have these ulterior motives to upsell you and to profit more. And we want you to get exactly what you want, to then go and save your life, like save the lives that you're trying to do.
I love that. Just going back to that impact of saving lives and helping other people.
I mean, I guess I was raised okay. I don't want to. My parents will probably listen to this. I don't want to give them too big of a head, but they did a good job teaching me the golden rule, at least.
I love that. And Chris, my last question to you is if you can go back to when you were in the labs, and for
Physics.
anyone who, who are doing their research now, they're in grad school, what advice would you give to young Chris and for any of those people who are in that same position now?
I guess the easiest answer would be don't say no. And it's something that I actually just had this conversation with a friend that I'm still telling myself, don't say no. And she was arguing with me sometimes, like, you want to set boundaries and do this, but I was like, no, I don't want to. You want to try. And what I would say is don't say no because you're scared, because of the unknown and you don't know what's going to become of it. Like life to me is like an experiment. If you don't put yourself out there and you don't try new things, then you will have that regret, right? You will come back with that. But if you learn to say yes and in the right way, I think that's what I would tell myself because I did say no a lot when I was younger, and I still do say it. Probably I don't want to say more often than I should, but just be open. Yeah, like I would tell myself. I mean, that's hard because I told myself I wanted to travel the world, and now I've done it. So now I'm actually hitting that point in my life where I'm trying to figure what that next step is going to be.
Mm.
So that now, and I would tell myself to practice golf more.
Golf, okay.
Yeah, because that was like when I started the MBA program, they asked us to write a letter to ourselves, like that we'd open in 10, 15 years or whatever it was. And luckily, I have pretty good memory, so I remember what I wrote anyways. But I know that it involved me achieving success, retiring at 40, and then taking 10 years to work on my golf game to join the senior PGA Tour at 50. So I'm a few years behind that trajectory, but I'm a lot closer than I guess I could have been.
Okay.
Looking back 20 years ago or 15
Yeah.
years ago when I wrote that letter. But yeah, it's tough to look back. It's actually like I said physics when you started the question because that's another one of my questions in the interview. But I don't ask them to my younger applicants because it's hard to ask somebody who just got their PhD or master's if you had to do your education over again, what would you do? Because they just finished. Right? They
Yeah.
don't they don't know what they would do. They don't know. But for some of the older people we interview, I always ask them because I know for me, if I had to do it over again and I was this close to going into biophysics and I love math and genetics doesn't have as much math. I mean, unless you
Mm.
go into population genetics, evolutionary genetics, which I did, touch on. But I think physics is an area that I always kind of thought I might have missed out on. And a lot of
Mm.
my ideas in genetics kind of have a lot of physics involved with it and a lot of kinetics. So it would have been nice to maybe throw that in as another area, but at the same time, like I wouldn't have wanted to taken away anything I've learned. I would just add it on. But I
Gotcha.
was I was taking 36 grad hours for a few years,
Oh, wow.
so
Okay. So
why
physics
not
and
take some
golf.
more? Yeah,
Physics and golf.
and that was
Okay.
36 grad hours a semester.
Oh my God. That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was two full 18,
Yeah.
18 business, 18
Wow.
science.
Yeah. You're not an overachiever at all.
Not really. And it's funny too because that doesn't come from my parents. That's all me. I don't know where that comes from.
I think when you're an entrepreneur, it comes from somewhere. Because, yeah, I feel similar in that aspect of like, my parents were like, they were like Asian in terms of like, go to school, get a higher education, and do well for yourself. But they were never like, you have to like do this, this, and this, and like you have to take extra hours. Most of it, yeah, most of it came from me because I just kind of had a vision for where I wanted to be with my life and just saw that like it's not by following the trajectory, the same trajectory that everybody else in the world follows. Got to do something
Yeah.
different.
And especially now, like at least I think like people like us have paved the way for the younger generation to kind of think outside the box.
Yeah.
And it actually goes to like one of the things obviously like you can cut this, you don't have to include this, but it's kind of like what I've noticed is like post pandemic, like degrees aren't degrees anymore.
No.
Like, it's truly
Yeah.
like a factory.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I'll hire like a master's in computer science, and it's like there's high school kids that know them,
Yeah.
like and they I mean, but this goes to the whole thing with like the student loans and like the biggest company. I mean, my master's in computer science actually was at George Washington University, and it was like the second most expensive school at the time. And it was just like and I learned that like GW is the largest business in DC. Like they generate the most, and I was like, wait, even more in Georgetown somehow.
Yeah.
And I was like, really?
Yeah.
It's a total moneymaker. It's a
Yeah,
total
absolutely.
moneymaker.
Absolutely.
I think
And
even when I graduated with all this student debt, the first thing they asked is like, "Oh, you want to donate?"
they call every semester, every 4 months.
I
It's
will.
like, do you
When
want
I need to donate, I'm donating to my undergrad
to?
because they have never asked me for a dime. Like, so they'll get it all. And it's
Yeah.
just a game too. I get frustrated because I got the MBA at the College of Business, and I'm like, I get like all these emails and updates, and it's like, here are the top 40 under 40, here are the top this and top that, and I'm nowhere. I'm nowhere. They don't even ask me. And then like I got frustrated, and they were like, "Do you donate?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Well, that's
That's the
weird. I
top
don't know."
40
So I said,
donors.
like, "Yeah, yeah." And I'm like, "Well, then it's just the top 40 donor
Yeah.
list." But when you see like branch manager at Chick-fil-A is like number 26, and like
Yeah.
I built it, and I'm like, and I'm not even anywhere to
Yeah.
speak. I was the first one to do a PhD MBA at the history of the university. Now,
Yeah.
no one wants to.
Yeah. It's all
Just
pay to
because
play.
yeah, I learned that for PR too.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
oh my gosh, like it's not the same.
It's
And that's the thing, is
crazy.
coming from the CEO and I, we're just like idealists, and we believe like, oh, if you do everything right and you treat people right and you do your good
Yeah.
research, it's going to pay off, right? It's going
Yeah.
to give you what you want and what you want to get out of life and what you deserve. And it's just not the case.
No.
But that's why we're trying to break the mold with Vector Builder, and we're not wearing. I was gonna say like we don't dress up, but we just had our 10th gala, and both myself and the CEO, we both had like custom crazy suits made just to like with like crazy bright colors and all this
I
stuff,
want to
just
see
to
photos of that. We'll attach it
yeah,
to
to bring it.
the podcast.
Well, I sent you a couple of them.
Okay.
He had like a more crazy one. It actually doesn't have. I actually have. And then I designed
Oh, what?
these shoes.
Oh, that's
I
nice.
designed
It's
these for
like bubble
Nike.
gum. That's
So this is
awesome.
our company colors, or close
Yeah.
to it.
Cool.
So we're like we're very nerdy
Yeah.
when it comes down to it. Like we're not the typical COO or CEO you think of a company like this. But it's because we're ultimately just scientists who work very hard, and just believe in not playing the games,
Yeah.
and that if you just put your head down and work hard, at least in our field, like it should be recognized and noticed, and it is. I
Yeah.
think it is.
Yeah, I think as a technology company, like you have to be nerdy if you want to be innovative. Like you can't have it any other way.
Well, I mean, you have like like in our field, like I'm sure you heard of Thermo Fisher, right?
I have not actually.
Like you have seen like now Thermo Fisher is like $1 trillion company. They're like the biggest company in life sciences. They like sell everything, and they just buy up companies here and there, and like they're just gigantic. There's like I don't know, they have probably like they have offices in like 150 countries or whatever. They're everywhere, and people from there are always applying to work here, and it just is never going to be a good fit.
Mm.
Like we can't and that's another reason why I'd like to bring in people who are young and hungry, because the last thing we want is somebody coming from these established giants and saying like, well, this is how they did it,
Yeah.
this is how they did it, this
Yeah.
is how we should do it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but we're not trying to just be, oh, well, why don't you want to be like them? They're like a 25-30 billion-dollar company, and it's like, yeah, but it's not about your valuation or this. I don't think any of it really comes down to that. I mean, I used to, like when I was younger, you think that's what matters, but
Yeah.
then you get older and you realize that it's relationships, it's people that really, it's the reason we live, right?
Yeah, the values change over time. I mean, we were talking about it earlier about how like you value time, some people don't value time. It's just as you get older, your values just completely change. And the same thing as well for me. It's like when you're young, you're like, oh, I want to be a billionaire by the time I'm 30. I'm gonna have kids by the time I'm like 32. And like just I don't know, different value system. And now when you're actually, in your 30s, when you're at the age that you thought you were going to have everything, you're like, oh, life's really different, and like none of that actually matters at all. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about how you value other people, what impact you're going to create in the world, and hope that you've created something positive for someone else.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like I said, I have sacrificed a lot. But when everyone asks me, like, oh yeah, because I'm not married, no kids, or any of that stuff, and like, but I feel like all my team members are my family, and even like some of them, like even when I hired, I have someone this is the first person we hired during the pandemic, and she's like my little sister. Like I look at her as and like she's actually I think younger than my little sister, but like she just always was just I don't know. It's just different, and like I love to see her succeed. Right? It's like you feel like a big brother. Like
Yeah.
if I could teach her, and then she succeeds and does the things that she wants to get out of her life, it just makes you feel better. And I guess that's what like being a parent is. But at the same time,
Mm.
I don't have like the responsibility of raising kid.
Yeah.
So
I hear a lot of my entrepreneur friends and also what I'm seeing online of men saying, because I got married and I don't have that distraction of chasing girls, that's why I was able to find success in my company. And it's interesting because you're saying something completely opposite to that, which is because I don't have
I'm a
wife.
nerd. Well, I'm not like chasing girls, like they're chasing girls. Like I'm a scientist. Like we get a girl like once every 7 years, and you're like happy.
Oh my God. Okay.
Like no, but I guess I could see it, and like I'm getting to where I could see it more. But I mean, like yeah, like they say behind every great person, there's a great spouse or whatever it is. I don't know. I guess like again, it's just like to each his own, right? But for me, I mean, you'd have to find the right person who would like allow you to still like work like a dog. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't see how you could really become an entrepreneur and not put in the hours.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
that's like one of the biggest things that the younger generation doesn't get is they think like they're just going to be an influencer and they're just
Yeah.
going to live life and then like going to get make the millions and it's
Yeah.
and it's hard even for me to explain to some of my colleagues. I'm like, look, you want to move up and become like a director, like bye weekends, like hello working nights, like
Yeah.
and it's just one of those. Oh, what do you mean? It's like yeah, like you want to make more money, you have to work
Yeah.
well, yeah, but not if like it's like yeah, you could like, but it's just the saying that I really just really don't like is this: work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I to me, it's just that's like the theme of the new generation of like we don't want to work. It's
Yeah.
like why don't you work harder and work smarter?
Yeah. Exactly.
Like because sometimes you need to put in the hours.
Yeah.
Like there's only so many hours in the day, and you just got to put it on. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not for everybody.
Exactly. It's
But
not for everyone. It's a different mentality, different way of living. And those who are willing to do both are the ones who are usually the ones succeeding.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it could go both ways. Like our CEO he's married and he has a kid, so and he works more than me.
But is he a nerd? I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, and his wife works for the company, so like
Okay.
so it makes it a lot easier, right?
Gotcha.
When it's all like when you could kind of vent about all that stuff, I guess, and like you're just constantly going. But the time zones make it tough too. I mean, like tomorrow is actually a holiday. That's why I'm like, okay, like
Oh, okay.
you can take it late because I'm actually
Yeah.
just gonna like build a shoe rack and clean up and
Yeah.
just kind of relax because tomorrow's a holiday. So like again, like I should take the day off and I probably will go play at least 9 holes. But I look at it as like, oh, tomorrow's a holiday, so I could relax and catch up with my
Yeah.
and that shouldn't be like oh, tomorrow's a holiday, so I could like slowly catch up on
Yeah.
that I missed earlier because I didn't work Sunday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I think when you find the right people, and again, I don't want to take too much out of it because sometimes it doesn't even feel like work, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when I'm traveling around, but I would say that like one of the biggest things that I've noticed is it's just a progression of as the company grow and like then as my role changed. Like I don't want to say changed, but like I mean, I guess it did, right? Like I mean, like I went from doing everything in the company and
Mm.
like visiting clients, like going to the conferences, doing all that stuff to, now I feel like all I do is just make decisions. Like I
Hmm.
just am peppered with 100 decisions a day.
Yeah.
And it's just like boom, 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 boom. So it's just like a very different type of mentality, I guess,
Yeah.
on how it changes so quickly too. It just went from one way or another. And now I'm like, I mean, I actually went to a conference in Australia
Yeah.
and it's my first one in like 2 years, I think, or a year and a half. And it was like, oh, it's good to be back. It's good to be back,
Mm-hmm.
back at the talks. But yeah, I mean, but at the same time, somebody has to do it, right? Somebody has to
Yeah.
roll up the sleeves and actually build the company.
Yeah. But when you brought that up, I was like, oh, I need to ask you because I think one of the hardest things, just not even just being an entrepreneur, but in life, is making hard decisions, is making decisions, period. Especially when you're making decisions all the time, right? So, one, do you ever get decision fatigue? Two, how do you know when something is the right decision? Like, do you have a process for how you come to deciding on something really important? Because I get stuck on that all the time. I have a tendency to take way too long to make a decision. And I know that like not making a decision is the worst decision. I know that mentally, but I'm just like, gotta weigh out different options and things like that. So I'm curious if you have a process in place to get to that, to get to a good decision.
That's a great question. And part one, do I get decision fatigue? Absolutely. Like there's times where I think it was actually even like 2, 3 weeks ago, I made two decisions that were not my best. So I just shut down and was like, no more decisions getting made today until
Mm.
like I get to sleep. And I take almost about like 14, 16 hours off before I make my next decision. So like decision fatigue 100% happens. And when it does happen, it's about noticing it and just stopping the process that I've built, which is going to address your second part of the question. Obviously, when I first started and building the company and then building a team and little business units into a team, I was similar to like how you described. I tend to overanalyze everything and I overthink it, and I was just trying to compare and make that perfect decision. And then I started to notice that 8, 9 times out of 10, that perfect decision was my initial gut decision. So I would say like the two qualities that I kind of use to make my decision is one is like decide using like empathy and use put yourself in their shoes like because these decisions could be their employment like whether we're going to let them go or not and put them how is this going to affect them? How is this going to affect the company? How is this, put myself in employee shoes, put myself in company, like say an investor shoes, and just in all different aspects. And then take that wherever you were going to make the decision and how is it going to affect party A, party B, and kind of think about from that way. And then number two is definitely just trusting your gut. At the end of the day, like some people have it and some people don't. And as a scientist, I always wanted to wait for more information. But building this company, I realized that like that's not how you successfully do it, and you have to make quick decisions because otherwise you're wasting time and things aren't getting done. And then you have all these people waiting on you for you to make your decision. So then you're just kind of like dragging your feet. So what my process typically is I'll wake up in the morning or whenever I did like, whenever I take my 8 to 10 hour break from not working. And then I basically, before I look at any decision, like I'll look at the players, right? I'll look at what is the decision I have to make. I won't decide right away. And then I'll go for a walk. I'll go to the gym, I'll go to the grocery store and just kind of think about it and let it settle. And not one at a time. I wouldn't be very efficient. Like I'll go through like the 10 decisions I have to make right away. And then I'll be thinking about all 10 of those while I'm on the treadmill, I'm walking, I'm doing whatever, and then kind of process it. And then I'll sit down kind of in the evening around this time, and then I'll just go boom, 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 and just make them very quickly. So that's kind of it's been working, but like everything, I'm always prone to make mistakes. And,
Gotcha.
Again, it's about, and the thing is, it's about admitting them. I think that's like one big thing it's a big pet peeve of mine is admitting when you can make a mistake, right? Like we all make them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have those friends, right? Those friends who like refuse to, even when they like, it's so simple. Like they misspoke. Like you ever have a friend who
Of
said
course.
like, they said something one way, but they meant to say it the other way and you correct them, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, you meant this. And they're like, no, that's what I said. Everyone has
Yeah.
these situations. And to me, it's like a huge defining characteristic of somebody's person, kind of like just the way they are.
Yeah.
If they refuse to admit that they said, because like, what harm is it?
Yeah.
What harm is it if you admit like you said something wrong? Even if you truly think you said that right, just go with it.
Yeah.
Just admit that you said it wrong. And to me, like when they were like, no.
Yeah.
That's just what I said. I know it for a fact. I know what came out of my mouth. It's like I know what I heard. Like,
Yeah.
and I've gotten into arguments like in high school or like stuff with like just like in high school I got in a fist fight with somebody over something like that because we used to play hockey and he said it like on a line change. And in hockey they it's the one sport where they like allow you to fight so you don't hit each other with the sticks, right?
Yeah.
Or take your skate off and try to cut somebody. So so just like, and then it goes to kind of like my other thing of like being a hypocrite. Like I don't like when people get so kind of taken away when you call them a hypocrite because like I admit like I'm a hypocrite. I think everyone in the world is a hypocrite and like and they take that word the wrong way. It's like no, I'm not saying like on everything you do you're hypocritical, but there is something
Yeah.
that you're going to be a hypocrite. Like, well, maybe it's food, right? It's like, I like this cheese, not this cheese, but like I refuse to eat this cheese, but it's made out of this cheese. You're a
Yeah.
hypocrite, right? Like, it could be something really basic, but it's like kind of one of those things how when I meet people, I kind of try to bring up things like this to see if they're willing to admit when they're
Hmm.
wrong or when they misspoke, or if they're willing to admit that like we all have tendencies that we
Yeah.
can, as human, we can't avoid,
Yeah,
and nobody's perfect.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and how you
but I'm
do,
digressing now.
yeah, and how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Like, so you want to see like
Yeah,
how they own up to you calling them out, and yeah, and seeing if they're
yeah,
flexible to kind of go with it or not.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Well, Chris, thank you so much for this amazing
Well, I'm
interview.
sorry for your editing because you're gonna have to but no, it
No,
was
this is
fun.
good. This is great. And so if anyone wants to find you, get in contact with you, what's the best way that they can reach you?
Oh, I guess through the company. Like if you contact the company and you're trying to get a hold of me, you could just say I watched me the Visionaries podcast, and I'd love to be able to talk to me. Like then if you tell whoever answers the company email that, like they'll pass it on to me, and 9 times out of 10 I'll reach out and have a phone call with you. I mean, like I want to give back to everything I've learned and done if time allows. Just train the next wave of future entrepreneurs.
Amazing. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on our show, Chris.
Great.